Hi guys, today is day 4. The Republic of Zamboanga, 1899. The Revolution's Forgotten Republic. What if I told you that while Emilio Aguinaldo was setting up his government in Luzon, another republic quietly emerged in Mindanao that actually got it right? A republic where Christians and Muslims governed together as equals, where diversity wasn't just tolerated, but celebrated in the Constitution itself, where a mestizo general, Spanish-speaking Filipinos, and Muslim datus created something revolutionary, not just politically, but socially. This republic lasted only 5 months before American forces crushed it, and history conveniently forgot it ever existed. Why? Because it proved that Filipinos didn't need colonial powers to manage diversity. They could do it themselves. This is day 4 of Hidden Philippine History, and if you've been following this series, you know we're uncovering truths that textbooks buried. Smash that like button, help us hit 500 likes, and subscribe, because today's story will change how you see the Philippine Revolution forever. It's May 1899. The Philippine-American War has been raging for 4 months. In Manila, Aguinaldo's First Philippine Republic is desperately trying to fight off American forces that have superior weapons, better logistics, and an empire's resources behind them. The dream of independence is dying in Luzon, but in Zamboanga, something unexpected is happening. While the North fights a losing war, the South is building something new. To understand the Republic of Zamboanga, you need to understand Zamboanga's unique position in 1899. This isn't Manila. This isn't even Visayas. Zamboanga sits at the crossroads of Christian Filipino, Spanish colonial, and Muslim Moro worlds. The Spanish have controlled the city itself for centuries, building Fort Pilar in 1635 as a defensive position against the Sultanate of Sulu and other Moro powers. But Spanish control never extended far beyond the fort. The surrounding regions remained under Muslim sultanates that fiercely resisted Spanish colonization for 300 years. By 1899, Zamboanga's population is incredibly diverse. Spanish colonials and their mestizo descendants who've lived there for generations. Christian Filipino soldiers and settlers brought by the Spanish to garrison the fort. Muslim Moros from various ethnic groups, Tausug, Yakan, Sama, Subanon, who've never fully submitted to Spanish rule. Chinese merchants who've established trading networks. This isn't a homogeneous population. It's a powder keg of different communities with different languages, different religions, different loyalties, and a long history of conflict. In February 1899, when the Philippine-American War breaks out, Spanish forces still occupy Zamboanga. They haven't surrendered to the Americans yet, and they definitely haven't surrendered to Filipino revolutionaries. But they're isolated, cut off from reinforcements, watching their empire collapse around them. The Spanish garrison knows it's only a matter of time. Enter Vicente Alvarez, a mestizo general born in Zamboanga to a Spanish father and a Filipino mother. Alvarez is fascinating because he represents the complexity of Filipino identity that simple nationalist narratives can't accommodate. He's culturally Spanish, speaks Spanish as his first language, but he's also deeply Filipino, born on this soil, connected to this land. When the revolution comes, Alvarez makes a choice. He sides with Filipino independence. In May 1899, Alvarez leads a revolutionary movement that does something extraordinary. Instead of simply declaring Zamboanga part of Aguinaldo's republic, instead of imposing a government from Manila, he brings together the diverse communities of Zamboanga and says, let's build something ourselves. Christian Filipinos, Muslim datus, former Spanish loyalists who switched sides, Chinese merchants. They all participate in creating what becomes the Republic of Zamboanga. On May 18, 1899, they declare independence and establish a government. But here's what makes this republic revolutionary beyond the obvious political independence. They draft a constitution that explicitly guarantees representation for both Christian and Muslim communities, not as an afterthought, not as a concession, as a foundational principle. The government includes Muslim datus in positions of real authority. They're not tokens. They're not symbolic appointments. They have actual power in governance. Think about how radical this is. The Philippine Revolution in Luzon struggled constantly with Muslim-Christian relations. Aguinaldo's government never figured out how to include Muslim Mindanao in its vision of the Philippines. The Spanish spent 3 centuries trying to conquer the Moro sultanates and failed. The Americans would spend decades fighting brutal wars against Muslim resistance. But here in Zamboanga, for a brief moment, they figured it out. The Republic of Zamboanga creates functioning governmental departments. They establish a Department of War, responsible for defense, a Department of Treasury, managing finances and tax collection, a Department of Justice, handling legal matters. They issue their own currency because nothing says sovereignty like printing your own money. They organize a military combining Christian Filipino revolutionaries with Moro warriors who agreed to join the common cause. They established diplomatic relations, sending communications to Aguinaldo's government in Luzon and trying to coordinate revolutionary efforts. The Republic's military forces are particularly interesting. This isn't just Christian Filipinos with guns. The Zamboanga forces include Moro warriors bringing 3 centuries of military tradition fighting Spanish colonialism. These are people whose ancestors fought the Spanish to a standstill for generations. When they join forces with Christian Filipino revolutionaries, they create a formidable combined fighting force that understands both conventional and guerrilla warfare. For 5 months, the Republic of Zamboanga functions as an independent nation. They govern, they collect taxes, they maintain order, they defend their territory. They prove that Filipinos can govern themselves without colonial oversight. More importantly, they prove that Filipino governance can be pluralistic, that a republic can honor Muslim autonomy while building a unified nation. This is the model of what the Philippines could have been, but the Americans are coming. By late 1899, American forces have defeated or scattered most of Aguinaldo's armies in Luzon. They're consolidating control and expanding southward. Zamboanga represents unfinished business. On November 16, 1899, American forces under General John C. Bates arrive at Zamboanga with overwhelming military force. The Republic of Zamboanga faces a choice: fight and be destroyed, or surrender and hope for mercy. They choose to fight. The battle is brief and brutal. American forces have modern artillery, machine guns, and naval support from gunboats in the harbor. The Zamboanga forces have rifles, bolos, and desperate courage. The outcome is never in doubt. By the end of the day, American forces occupy Zamboanga. The Republic is finished. Vicente Alvarez and other leaders are captured or flee. The brief experiment in pluralistic governance is over. Here's where the story gets darker. The Americans, having conquered Zamboanga, immediately implement divide-and-rule strategies perfected by colonial powers worldwide. They separate Christian Filipinos from Muslim Moros administratively. They establish the Moro province as a separate entity under American military rule, specifically excluding it from the civilian government being set up for Christian areas. They sign the Bates Treaty, with the Sultan of Sulu, essentially recognizing continued Muslim autonomy while undermining any possibility of Christian-Muslim political unity. Why would the Americans do this? Because a united Philippines, especially one that had already proven it could govern itself pluralistically, would be harder to control. The Republic of Zamboanga was dangerous not because of its military power, which was negligible compared to American forces, but because of what it represented. It showed that Filipinos didn't need American tutelage to manage diversity. The Republic of Zamboanga also reveals something important about the Philippine Revolution itself. The revolution wasn't monolithic. It wasn't just Aguinaldo's government fighting Americans in Luzon. It was multiple movements across the archipelago, each adapting to local conditions, each building different visions of what Philippine independence could mean. Zamboanga's vision, pluralistic and inclusive, might have been more successful long-term than the Luzon-centric nationalism that eventually prevailed. Today, very few Filipinos know the Republic of Zamboanga existed. It's not in textbooks. There are no monuments to Vicente Alvarez in Manila. The brief moment when Christians and Muslims governed together as equals has been forgotten, buried under a century of conflict that colonial powers created and nationalist narratives couldn't resolve. But the memory matters. The Republic of Zamboanga proves that the Bangsamoro struggle for autonomy isn't anti-Filipino. It's deeply Filipino, rooted in a tradition where Muslim self-governance was respected as part of a larger Philippine identity. It proves that pluralism isn't a foreign concept imported by modern multiculturalism. If this forgotten republic moved you, hit that like button and help us reach 500 likes. Subscribe and turn on notifications because tomorrow is day 5, the final episode, and we're covering the Balangiga encounter of 1901, a story where the line between massacre and military victory reveals the brutal truth of the Philippine-American War.